Exactly.
The fundamental principle undergirding the modern West is that we put lineage aside and we collaborate as a people because collaboration is a good thing to do. And you and I also remember, the 80s and 90s, and it just wasn't like this. It's not that there was no bigotry or anything, but we knew what direction we were heading.
It was totally unacceptable to act like this. It
Right.
was totally unacceptable. And the idea that you would parse someone else's religious views in public. I mean, the working assumption I grew up with as a Southern California WASP was our religious views are right. That's that's our religion, so we think we're right. But let's be honest, everyone's religious views sound pretty kooky when exposed to the light of day. So how about we don't do that? And how about if we have Mormon neighbors or Jewish neighbors, or in my case, Roman Catholic neighbors? What's the point of getting into how their doctrine differs from ours? We're confident that ours is right and theirs is wrong, but we can also see them as really great people. And the last thing we're going to do is sit down and be like, let's talk about transubstantiation. That sounds really crazy. It's why would you do that unless you wanted to permanently be at war with your neighbors? And all of a sudden I'm reading all this stuff online about various people's religious views, and I have gotten into it myself with the Christian Zionists. I have explained their religious views on camera. I feel bad about doing that. I knew what their views were. I didn't want to talk about it until they were driving America's foreign policy. Anyway, I just feel like this is not a good road to go down, and we need to reestablish a little bit of Anglo-Saxon, sorry to brag about my culture, but restraint here, where there are certain things we don't talk about at dinner, and one of them is your sex life, and another is your religious beliefs. And we've often been made fun of for that. You guys are so constipated. You can never talk about anything real. Yeah, not in public. You don't actually, because it causes fractures that don't heal. That's why we don't do that. Let's get back to that soon.
Couple of points. Well,
sorry.
No, I mean, look, you're being cautious about something. I think we've got a 5-alarm fire on this front.
Yes.
There's a reason we don't do this. And among the many strengths of your monologues, and I want to talk about them at some point, but among the many strengths, you're a guy with religious convictions.
Yes.
You make no secret of that. When you talk in your monologues, I hear you talking as a patriot, as a secular person.
Yes.
I hear you talking in a way that I can completely relate to, and it places your religious beliefs exactly where they should be relative to me. I can respect those as your beliefs. You're not asking me to accept them,
No.
and they are not informing your beliefs about policy.
We're not allowed to.
We're not allowed to. The founders were very clear about this, and it's not that they didn't have religious beliefs of their own. They were clear about it because it's a slippery slope to hell. It's a slippery slope back into the past where the only thing that matters is what tribe you're from. Well, I will say one of the things that this is doing to me as I'm trying to review how we ended up here, a place I would not have imagined we could end up.
No, I know.
Is that I don't feel like the Judaism that is being represented in the world is familiar. I know that it exists, but it's not what I grew up with. I grew up in a secular Jewish home in which the values were decidedly Jewish and they were explicit. And what we did was think through difficult issues very carefully. And I will tell you, the Holocaust played a big role in my upbringing.
I'm sure.
I did not, at the point that I became cognizant, understand how recent it was. I now, of course, do because I've, lived for 57 years. But the idea that this is something that can happen, yes, it can happen here, and you need to understand what happened, and you need to understand who lived, the people who told themselves, it's bad, it will pass, they're resettling us to the east, whatever. Those people died. The people who saw it early didn't. And the people who understood it didn't. So in any case, my point is...
Can I say as an Episcopalian, and this is not a compliment to the Episcopal Church, but it not so different from Reformed Judaism. Reformed Judaism was actually kind of modeled on the Episcopal churches. You may or may not know, but it was. Yeah, Temple Bethel is kind of like an Episcopal church, sort of, or started that way. German Jews, rationalists, let's explain this. Let's think through all the hard problems, de-emphasis on the miraculous, emphasis on the rational, very similar. The one lesson that I got from hearing about the Holocaust constantly growing up in a very Jewish school was exactly what you said right then, is that don't lie to yourself. I'm not Jewish, so I wasn't thinking about it in those terms, but like the lesson is universally applicable. Like if you see the leaves changing, it's probably fall. Like don't tell yourself it's not. And Hannah Arendt, who I was, always loved Hannah Arendt. And I just think Hannah Arendt was like a kind of a genius and a non-conventional thinker. But that was kind of the lesson that I took from her books, not just Eichmann in Jerusalem, but she wrote a lot of magazine pieces, which I read. And she kept saying that, like, just don't lie to yourself. And I have taken that my whole life, and maybe to the extreme. Like I'm probably too jumpy about certain things, but like, look at the trend lines. And I would say they are it. We should be panicked, not just for Jews, though for Jews, but for all of us, because tribalism kills everybody in the end. And we should be panicked about its rise. Panicked.
Oh, absolutely. We are looking at a return to an evolutionary mode of being. And to give it its due, I will just say that the way history worked until 5 minutes ago, until the invention of the modern West, was that populations displace each other or they get displaced. That's the game. And unfortunately, I now see, first of all, I see myself being spoken for as a Jew. I find Benjamin Netanyahu speaking for me, and I don't know what I am supposed to resign from so that he no longer has that right. I don't know where it comes from. What's more, I want to know where the tradition that I grew up with, which I will defend, went.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like, I've been sort of looking into it. I'm not, deeply embedded in Judaism. I have a good friend, an increasingly good friend who is a scholar of Jewish mysticism. I learn a lot from him about these various things. I also increasingly realize that my tradition emerges from Maimonides, who, I barely knew who Maimonides was, but he was a 12th century philosopher, Jewish philosopher, and medical doctor in Spain. And he had this hard-headed, very rigorous Jewish approach to thinking, and he was actually well respected outside of Judaism because he was so insightful. And in any case, my point is, we are seeing a very, in my opinion, foolish version of this tradition, and a very dangerous one, because it sort of hybridizes these, I think most of the, and I don't like the term Zionism because it morphs on you, right? Sometimes Zionism just means that you believe that the state of Israel should exist, in which case, okay, I'll sign up for that. Sometimes it means that you want to see it expanded in some way. And it's like, hey, hold on, wait a minute. We've got a lot riding on not just overwhelming people because they come from a different branch of the tree. So no, I'm not signed up for that. But my sense is here's what's
exactly, I'm just laughing. I wish I could put it as crisply as you just said, that those are exactly my views.
It's crazy.
I know.
And so I think this is the thing that I haven't heard anybody else say it. Maybe others have. But the thing that is so confusing about what's going on in the present, what's now begun in Iran, is if I just look at it like an anthropologist, that's a holy war. It's a holy war, but it's being led by secular Jews.
Exactly.
And it is that secularness that cloaks it, that makes it look like something it isn't. And I'm not saying, look, I am no fan of the Iranian theocracy, right? I couldn't be more frightened by that structure. For the same reason, I don't want to see a holy war initiated by Israel. Frankly, holy war has no place in a world where we should be moving towards the values of the modern West.
Because it's hard to resolve them. Very hard.
Well, I mean, it gets resolved by one population displacing another period at the end. And the point is, you know, if you want to talk about the Holocaust, that's what it was, right?
Of course.
It was a population taking advantage of the fact that there was another population that couldn't defend itself, that had some wealth. And the point is, you can create growth by exterminating those people and taking their stuff, right? That's what it is. And that's a go-to strategy. So to the extent that anybody on earth is advocating for, hey, let's paint those people as demons and then we'll exterminate them and take their stuff, right? That is not a way the world can go on. Now, it did go on that way, but it did not go on that way in the nuclear era. We can't play that game anymore. It has to end. And I don't think that this discussion is going to be a win for me in the world. I think I'm going to pay dearly for having had it.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But
I just live on another planet. This seems like the most reasonable, moderate American conversation you could ever have.
that's the problem with it.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand the country as well as I thought I did.
Well, no, I think you and I understand a version of the country that works to an extent. Again, it's a prototype. It doesn't work brilliantly, but it works. And we understand the aspiration of what it's supposed to do if it really works, right? And of course, that's hard to let go of once you've seen it. And we are being forced to let go of it. And, you know, I will say I've been accused in very close quarters of having a martyr complex. I do not. My life is personally so good, I am not eager to leave it one
I feel the same way.
instant sooner than I have to. However, I'm also aware that what it is to be a man is to face the fact that there are hills worth dying for. And I don't want to, but the point is we have to defend the hill that is the modern West, and we have to defend it from this impulse to view the world through a lens of what lineage do you come from and what are we entitled to, and, you know, deeds to land that go back millennia or whatever it is. That's not the way this can work if we are to continue as a species. So I don't know how we can turn down the temperature and get people who have already chosen a team to rethink whether that was a reasonable thing to do, but they are signing us up for an unthinkable conflagration. And, you know, to have Benjamin Netanyahu in a position to steer the United States, and I think that is what has happened. You can tell that by what Marco Rubio has said, and if we take the mild version, you know, where he says it was the timing that was forced by Israel. Okay, that's still unacceptable. If we take the more aggressive interpretation, and the fact is we were forced into this because Israel wanted it, that is completely unacceptable. And we cannot survive this way. And I don't know how to say this delicately, but your sense that anti-Semitism is being amped up, and it seems essentially deliberate. And you've heard, as you said, from Bill Kristol, the idea that must circulate somewhere that a bit of anti-Semitism is good because it reminds Jews of who they are. We don't need that reminder. We can be very academic. We can understand these things based on patterns of history, and we do. So we don't need this amped up. So my point is, I also feel an obligation as a Jew to stand up for the other set of values that I think are better and that really characterized Judaism, at least in America, much more so than today when we were growing up, right? That careful tradition, the one that holds the values very deeply, would not create false portrayals in order to advance a political agenda, much less a military one.
It was the world's... I'm very familiar with Reform Judaism, is what I grew up around. And I'm very familiar with it, certainly with the tone of it. And it was always like, you know, it was like the least aggressive. It was just very much in tone and spirit, like the church that I grew up in. You like ask a question and be like, well, it's hard. You know, it would always be like, it's hard.
Well, that's...
And you could make fun of that, and I've certainly made fun of it a lot with my own church. But you're not going to get a lot of extremists coming out of that. Like, period. it acknowledged the complexity of every human decision and of the human condition. And I think there's something nice about that.
Well, this is uncomfortable. I don't think I'm talking about Reform Judaism, though I think the thing I'm talking about would have been found in many.
Did you grow up going to temple?
No.
Oh, wow.
Well, I will tell you, I felt a little left out by that. My family was secular, atheist, and, decidedly scientific.
So you were not bar mitzvahed?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, wow.
But I wanted to be. And what happened, this will tell you a lot about me. What happened was I asked to go to Hebrew school for the purpose of being bar mitzvahed. I thought it seemed like a thing I should do, even though I wasn't a believer. A lot of Jews aren't believers.
Yeah.
That's one of the strange things about Judaism. It's not really about belief in that sense, or it's not about faith. It can be. For many it is, but for many it's not. And you remain Jewish. You don't lose your Jewishness just because you're secular. So I asked, and my parents saw no reason not to and signed me up, and I went. And I remember asking questions about things that didn't add up in the portrayal that we were being given. And I expected it to be like the family dinner table. In the family dinner table, you could ask any question, and it was taken seriously and
That's
properly
how I grew
addressed.
Up. Same.
And that was not the response that I got. I got a response that was basically designed to sort of, I now know what the response is because I've seen bad professors do it, right? The professor who doesn't really know their subject doesn't want to be asked questions that reveal that.
Parents are the same way.
Well, it's funny. My house wasn't like this.
No, neither was mine. My father would answer any question and never judged you for asking it.
Yeah, my family was like that, and my grandfather particularly so. My grandfather was very good with kids. He took them very seriously. He was tremendously fun. It wasn't like he was a super serious guy. He was very fun and very adventurous, take you out into, climb mountains and stuff with him. But anyway, you could ask him any question about anything, and he would answer it as well as he could. And then you'd ask the next question. And when you finally got to the place where he couldn't answer the question, he'd say, I don't know. And here's what we might do to figure out the answer. Anyway, it was like having the world's best, personal tutor or mentor or something like that.
What a blessing. What did he do for a living?
Well, he was kind of I hate to say it, but he was either a failure in the sense of doing things for a living. He was too principled. He got blacklisted for his political beliefs. He was a chemist. Went to college but didn't finish it, got hired away, I think, by RCA Records to develop, the first vinyl to replace the lacquer records that had existed. So anyway, he worked in industry, and eventually he got a job in pollution control. He was an inspector inspecting factories. He was a very committed environmentalist, and so he was inspecting factories for pollution and things like that. And then Proposition 13 happened and he got fired. So he wasn't successful in the sense of a career. However, I do think the real meaning, his name was Harry, he's a great guy. The real meaning of Harry is that he was very wise about many things. He had seen a lot and he understood a lot, and he was wicked smart. And that he passed this on to any young person who would listen, especially me and Eric. But really, my friends all remember him too, right? I barely remember my friends' grandparents. I met a bunch of them, but they were old and it was hard to relate to them and all of that. But my grandfather made an impression on every friend of mine he ever met. And they asked about him right up until his death. How's Harry doing?
How old were you when he passed?
It was 2000.
Oh, he lived a long time.
Yeah, he did. He made it to 94.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, I've forgotten exactly why we were talking about Harry. It was just a question of what the culture was in my house. It was secular. It was intellectually committed and rigorous. And it wasn't trying to be mild, right? It was trying to do the right thing based on what the patterns of the world and the evidence suggested the right thing was. And I don't see that in the culture at the moment.
No,
and I don't understand how, Netanyahuism or whatever it is has overwhelmed it. Right? At the very least, look, you can do what you want. That's, our personal freedom is effectively sacred in the West, as it should be. But I feel entitled to continue that tradition and not be suspected of a moral defect for doing so.
Well, I couldn't agree more, of course. In fact, it's the thing I feel most strongly. And I think my right to express my views, my conscience, to defend myself. I mean, I think the Bill of Rights, these are natural rights bestowed by God. That's my opinion. It's my deepest belief. So I'm totally committed to everything you just said. And I grew up weirdly in a non-Jewish household, but also secular household with exactly the same vibe. My father was a wonderful man and very rigorous intellectually and also extremely open-minded. Like extremely. It was never like, I can't believe you think that. Never. And that was a massive advantage for me. I do think that world is dying because I think the systems are played out, and the systems that I love and support, liberal democracy, I think it's not growing anywhere in the world. And here's one measure of it. There's no country that I'm aware of in which the legislative body is getting stronger. They're all becoming weaker. The legislative body, of course, are the most democratic of all bodies. But, it is the voice of the people. It's the people's house. But that's true in every country with a system like ours, or a parliamentary system. And in every country that I'm aware of, those systems are becoming superfluous. They're becoming the Roman Senate. And that is a measure of a bunch of different things. Maybe it's the end of a life cycle. Maybe it's an expression of people's frustration with the awkwardness of the democratic system. It doesn't work very efficiently. Whatever it is, it's a global trend where power is vesting in the executive, where people are less free to say what they think. This is throughout the West. It may have to do, maybe most obviously, with the rise of China. The most successful country in the world is China. And so why wouldn't the rest of the world ape its system? I don't think that's crazy.